Happy New Year, viewers. You are welcome to Ambassador's channel. Today we'll be discussing the topic that has been a public health issue, that is hypertension. Present in the studio to do justice to this topic is a seasoned medical practitioner and a businessman. He is the MD of Datex Medics Limited and the chairman of Datex Export and Import Limited, Dr. Joachim Odiete. Dr. Joachim Odiete, you are welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
The other day I was watching a program and the presenter said the number of people coming down with hypertension is on a rise. So doctor, what is hypertension?
Thank you so very much for that interesting question. Now, blood pressure is a persistent rise in arterial blood pressure. You may want to ask, what is blood pressure? For us to explain the blood pressure, let's go to some of basic function of the heart. The heart is like a pumping machine. It pumps blood to the vessel, the major vessel, to the aorta, then to the systemic circulation. As the heart does that, the pressure or the force the circulating blood exerts on the wall of the vessel is what we call the blood pressure. And it has two basic components, because the heart squeezes out the blood and the heart also relaxes. When the heart squeezes out the blood into this vessel, the force that it exerts is what we call systolic blood pressure. And when the heart also relaxes for blood to flow into the ventricle, it is called diastolic blood pressure. Do you get that? To explain the blood pressure further, I will draw attention to a little formula calculations that will make us understand some facts about the blood pressure. Now, blood pressure is simply a product of cardiac output times total peripheral resistance. I will explain. A cardiac output, you may want to ask, what is cardiac output? Cardiac output is the amount of blood each ventricle is pumping out per minute. This is cardiac output. It's the amount of blood the ventricle is pumping out per minute. Now, peripheral resistance, total peripheral resistance. As the blood flows, then a resistance as it flows. The resistance to the flow of blood in the entire systemic circulation, that's what we call the total peripheral resistance. So, I want to take us to classification of hypertension. You may want to ask, doctor, what is the normal blood pressure? What is one that is said to be high, hypertension? Now, hypertension is classified as, like I said, we have two basic components. The normal blood pressure, normal, is a range, it's not a fixed figure, from 100 to 129 over 60 to 80 millimeter of mercury. This is normal. When you have a patient presenting with 120, 129 over 139 over 80 to 89, this is pre-hypertension. The first one I mentioned is normal. This is pre-hypertension. Now, hypertension is simply a blood pressure of 140 over 90. Hypertension is simply a blood pressure of 140 over 90 and above. So if a patient is presenting with blood pressure of this, it is termed hypertension. Now, you may want to ask, there are several causes of hypertension, different types. We have basically two types of hypertension. We have the primary hypertension or the essential hypertension, primary hypertension or essential, and a secondary. Primary hypertension doesn't have apparent cause. It's genetic and is due to lifestyle. A secondary is as a result of some diseases. It's associated with some renal diseases, endocrine dysfunction, and all that.
Thank you for that explanation. Now, how is hypertension developed?
Thank you for that interesting question. Now, to explain the causes of hypertension, I would like to draw your attention to some basic truth about hypertension, the type. Basically, we have two types of hypertension. We have the primary or essential hypertension, and two, secondary. Now, the primary hypertension has no apparent cause. A school of thought, some school of thought said it's the genetics of the lifestyle. Basically, it's the lifestyle and genetics. Then the secondary is caused by a disease of certain organ like the renal disease and endocrine dysfunction. Now, the basic causes etiology of primary hypertension is lifestyle and genetic. Then for secondary is condition. Secondary hypertension, on the other hand, is caused by condition resulting from other like renal, endocrine dysfunction. It could be pregnancy in women. Pregnancy induced hypertension. Further expansion of the causes of hypertension, I'd like to draw your attention to the formula I earlier mentioned. We said blood pressure is the product of cardiac output times total peripheral resistance. These two factors, any factor that affects these two factors can result to hypertension. For instance, if the cardiac output, any condition that increases the cardiac output can result to hypertension. Like salt intake can result in increased cardiac output. Now, a condition that will increase the heart to pump excessively, like increased heart rate, a patient that is faced with stress can also increase the cardiac output. If that happens, the blood pressure goes up. Then for peripheral resistance, the blood flows through a vessel. If you have two vessels, this is one vessel and the second vessel is thinner. Which one the blood will find it easier to flow through? The one that is wider. Then if you any condition that result to narrowing of the lumen will increase the total peripheral resistance. And if that happens, the blood pressure will increase. Conditions like stress, sympathetic activity, when adrenaline and noradrenaline is secreted into the system, it causes vasoconstriction. Constriction simply means narrowing of the vessel. If the vessel is narrow, if the vessel is narrow, it will take a higher resistance for the blood to flow through, and that will increase the total peripheral resistance. Now, another condition that will result in narrowing of the vessel is deposit of cholesterol. We call it atherosclerotic plate. In old age, the wall of the vessel is thickened, and if that happens, the resistance to the flow will also increase. And if that happens, the total peripheral resistance will increase. Now, I would like to draw our attention to a system in the body that perpetually increases the blood pressure. Now, when the blood is constricted, the lumen is narrowed, it will reduce the blood that is flowing through the kidney. A drop in cardiac output is circulating. Now, we said in the course of this talk that in the condition of stress, adrenaline and noradrenaline is released into the circulation. And what that those hormones does, they help in narrowing vasoconstriction. It vasoconstricts the vessel. And once the vessels are constricted, it reduces the blood that flows through the kidney. And if there is a decrease in blood flow to the kidney, it stimulates the release of renin. Renin is another agent that activates a system. We call it angiotensin system. Now, this renin release, it activates on the angiotensinogen secreted in the liver, and it converts angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1. Another hormone is also released. We call it angiotensinogen converting enzyme, also released, and it acts on the angiotensin 1. And angiotensin 1 is in turn converted to angiotensin 2. Now, angiotensin 2 is a potent vasoconstrictor. Once this is released, it helps to narrow all the systemic vessels, which result to increased total peripheral resistance we mentioned earlier. The another system that a drop in blood flow to the kidney will do is a release of aldosterone. Aldosterone a drop in blood flow to the kidney also stimulate release of stimulate the release of aldosterone. Aldosterone release help in the reabsorption of sodium ion. As sodium ion is being reabsorbed from the kidney, water goes along with it, H2O. Once that happens, if sodium ion is absorbed and water is moving with it, it will automatically increase the blood. Now, once the sodium ion and the water is reabsorbed into the system, the blood volume will increase. Once blood volume is increased, the cardiac output increases. And we said earlier that the blood pressure, BP, is a product of this total peripheral resistance we got from this angiotensin pathway and times the cardiac output, CO, from here. So you see that a drop or constriction of the vessel resulting from increased adrenaline from stress will perpetually increase the blood pressure in the system. Now, once the sodium ion and the water is reabsorbed into the system, the blood volume will increase. Once blood volume is increased, the cardiac output increases. And we said earlier that the blood pressure, BP, is a product of this total peripheral resistance we got from this angiotensin pathway and times the cardiac output, CO, from here. So you see that a drop or constriction of the vessel resulting from increased adrenaline from stress will perpetually increase the blood pressure in the system. To summarize the causes of hypertension in a layman's term, it's simply increased consumption of sodium diet, salt. Because we see from this formula, when you consume too much salt, increased cardiac output. Lack of exercise is another cause of hypertension. Then smoking, old age. We said earlier on that in old age, the wall of the vessels are thickened. So once that happens, the total peripheral resistance increases. Lastly, unhealthy diet can contribute to hypertension. When you eat, your diet is not healthy, you come down with obesity. There's what we call body mass index, BMI. A BMI result, a normal BMI should be a range of 18 to 25. Anything above from 25 to 30 is overweight. 30 to 40 is obesity. Now, once you are not eating right, you come down with obesity. Your BMI will fall within this range. And obese, they are prone to having hypertension because of what we just mentioned, the total peripheral resistance.
Thank you for that brilliant explanation. Now, why is hypertension referred to as a silent killer?
Hypertension is referred to as a silent killer because it does not present with symptoms. Just like you have malaria, you come down with headache, joint pain, and fever. Every other condition presents with symptoms. But in the case of hypertension, it doesn't present with symptoms. But it causes some complications that are irreversible. As the blood flows through the vessel, increase in the tension damages the vessel. If it happens in the brain, it can cause stroke. If it happens in the eyes, it's what we call hypertensive retinopathy. It can happen in various organs like kidney, renal failure. So that's why it's called a silent killer, but does not present with symptoms.
We want to go on a short break. When we come back, we'll be discussing the problem it could cause to those who have it, what treatment is available, and how can it be prevented. Could it be cured permanently? Stay tuned.